Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Pearson, and today I'm going to be demonstrating a think aloud modeling activity that comes from my unit plan. My unit uses song lyrics to increase engagement in learning about figurative language. Here in Arizona, students are required to learn figurative language in secondary school, and I will be teaching ninth and 10th grade soon, so I drew from those standards um, when I was creating this unit. Those are the standards we're going to be covering in my upcoming class. AZ State Standard AZELA 9 through 10.RL.4 states, determine the meaning of words and phrases as they are used in the text, including figurative and connotative meanings. Analyze the cumulative impact of specific word choices on meaning and tone. So that's the reason, and that's the state standard. For context, this lesson that I'm about to show you would be after students have been introduced to figurative language and after we have listened to the songs in class. I'll be demonstrating a think aloud activity on simulating how I might act while in front of the class. In reality, I want the students to pick the songs, but because I don't have the students right now, I just had to pick two songs that I liked. And so I'll talk about a little bit the research behind this. So this is supported by research from this book, which is Visible Learning for Literacy by Douglas Fisher, Nancy Frey, and John Hattie. This is a great book, and it basically what it does was published in 2016, and it takes common ELA classroom procedures and ranks them based on their impact size. So impact size is this formula they came up with. It comes from subtracting pre-assessment data from post-assessment data, and then dividing the averages of those two, dividing that by the average standard deviation. For reference, a standard year of schooling without any special kind of intervention has an impact size of about 0.4. The impact size for of study skills, which this will be a study skill, this will be modeling study skills. The impact size of study skills is 0.63, and I hope to encourage students to think metacognitively by showing them how my mind is working as I read through these lyrics and kind of speaking aloud like what I'm thinking. That metacognitive strategies have an impact size of 0.69. So together, this activity should help students better understand what happens when someone analyzes a text. And finally, I'm going to be doing this on the computer, sharing my screen. In reality, I prefer to do it on like a document camera right in front of the students with my hands so they can really see the connection from the text to the brain and then hopefully to them. So let's get started with the example. All right. So this is Edge of 17, written by Stevie Nicks. This is one of my favorite songs. But we're going to be reading it today from kind of the approach of figurative language. Specifically, the ones we would have covered in this class would be metaphor, first and foremost, simile, which there's a lot in this one, personification, alliteration, and sort of the basic ones. This unit comes after students have been exposed to the basic figurative language. All right, so let's begin. I'll pretend I'm in class. So, we would have just listened to this song. So then I would pull this up on the document camera and begin. So today we're going to be looking at this song, um, and I'm gonna show you how to analyze it, what we're looking for, what I'm looking for when I see a song like this, and I'm looking for figurative language. As we know, the unit is about how figurative language or poetry is everywhere. It's so common. It's just saying, I heard someone the other day saying like, "Oh, this smells like garbage." That's a simile right there. They're comparing something with like or as. It's so common. It's how we think, and it's common in music too, as we've seen. So here is Edge of 17. I'll read the chorus, or I'll read the lyrics and then kind of go from there. So the chorus, so we're starting with a simile. Just like the white-winged dove sings a song, it sounds like she's singing ooh, ooh, ooh. So naturally, you can see the trigger word for a simile is like right here. And actually, this line is interesting because, or this couple of lines has two similes. So it's just like the white-winged dove. So she's saying it, which it hasn't been named yet in the song, is just like the white-winged dove, which it's not. So it's comparing two things that are not. The same with like or as. Simile is a type of metaphor. Sings a song, sounds like she's singing. So this is another one, sounds like. So it's like, if someone sings like an angel, they sound like an angel. That's another simile. So if someone or something sings a song and it sounds like a dove, that's it's basically an extension of the same simile, but they're both similes. Ooh, ooh, ooh is just for the just for music. So then this line will repeat throughout the whole song. And actually, you've heard it already. So sings a song just like the white-winged dove sings a song, sounds like she's singing. You could also argue that singing, birds singing, is a type of personification because are birds singing when they're making noise? I mean, it sounds like it's singing to us, but it's really we're applying human standards onto a non-human thing, and that's the essence of personification. So I think you could argue that a bird singing, which is I mean, we hear that every day. We think of hearing the birds sing, that you could argue that's a personification. And so this song is great because it just shows simile after simile. And the days go by like a strand in the wind. So, like a strand in the wind. The days are like a strand in the wind. So, whenever I'm reading something and I see like in a sentence, I automatically think like it's a simile. It's probably a simile. There is not always a simile, um, but there's a good chance. So, you see like, then you kind of think, what comes before like? The days go by. So, the days go by like a strand in the wind. So, like something blowing in the wind, the days go by. This one is kind of a little, this is what I would call an implicit metaphor. So, in the web that is my own, I begin again. So, she saying? What is she saying she is like or she is? It's not a web, even though that's what's in it. So, I mean, what spins webs, right? Spiders. So, in the web that is my own, and this is a metaphor, but it's an implicit metaphor. So there's no she doesn't say I'm like a spider who spins webs. There you go. I'll add that on there so we can remember it. So she's implying that she's a spider. She's not saying I'm a spider. But because she has webs, she's saying she's not a human. She is this other thing. A lot of metaphors do appear like that. They don't just say, um, she is a spider. They say her web is tangled. Or she's in the web that she created. So, said to my friend, baby, everything stops. Nothing else mattered. He was no more, he was no more. And stop me if you see a piece of figurative language that I might miss. I haven't done this song before, so I'm reading it here with you. Then a baby, well, he seemed broken-hearted, something within him. But at that moment, the moment I first laid eyes on him, all alone on the edge of 17. This is something we'll come back to. Like, what is the edge of 17? What is going on here? Like, that's not a thing. I mean, it makes sense, but it doesn't make literal sense. It makes figurative sense. So we're going to come back to that and kind of try to answer like what is the edge of 17? And also by looking at this figurative language, we can see what is the song about. I mean, usually when you hear it, it's so automatic that you can pick it up. But sometimes it is a little more difficult. So we're going back to just like the white-winged dove, though I want to point out this chorus again because it's the same as the chorus up here. But there is another piece of figurative language in the chorus that I realize. And this is everybody's favorite. So we have a nice alliteration here. So sings a song, it sounds like she's singing. That is one, two, three, four, five, six S's in a row, which is a lot of S's. And that's what the alliteration is. It's the repeated consonant sounds at the beginning of words. So they don't always, usually they come together like she's singing, but they don't always have to. Usually there's one or two words between them. So sings a song, it sounds like she's singing, which is hard to say multiple times. But that alliteration, that repeated sound, kind of gives it an interesting, and it can also affect the mood. It gives it just a more figurative meaning, which we'll talk about. Um, but for now, let's just mark that and move on. And of course, if I was doing this in front of the class, I would always stop for any questions or ask clarifying questions, depending on the mood of the room. Okay, let's go to verse 2. Well, I went today. Maybe I will go again tomorrow. Yeah, yeah. The music there was hauntingly familiar. When I see you doing what I try to do for me with the words of a poet and the voice from a choir and a melody and nothing else mattered. So this is another type of figurative language, which we'll talk about probably next week or later in the unit, which is the repeating the beginning of the line. But for now, we'll just focus on the ones we identified, the personification, metaphors, similes, and alliterations. So, I mean, you could say that's an alliteration as well. You can do, because alliterations can be two words as well. So let's see, with the words of a poet and the voice from a choir. So you could say the speaker, who is the singing the song, in this case Stevie Nicks, is comparing, the you, so that's the second person, whoever she's singing the song to. She's comparing the words to the words of a poet, and then the voice from the voice from a choir. So does the person who she's speaking to have these things? Probably not, but it's a metaphor, right? So just like the white-winged dove, just like this. So now we go again, great similes here. Another simile. So two similes, one here, and then an alliteration. Then here's a nice personification. The clouds never expect it when it rains, but the sea changes color, the sea does not change. So with the slow, graceful flow of age, I went forth with an age-old desire to please on the edge of 17. So for brevity's sake, we'll just talk about that first line there. So the clouds never expect it. Do clouds expect things? No. So that's personification. You're putting human characteristics onto an object. Um, then it just repeats the chorus. And then we'll move into verse 4. Again, for brevity, we don't want to go too long here, but this could be extended over much longer. Plus, it's harder to do it when you don't have an audience, but you can really get into like how you're thinking. So I'll try to demonstrate that here. So, well then, suddenly, there was no one left standing in the hall. Yeah, yeah. In a flood of tears that no one really ever heard fall at all. That's a nice rhyme right there. When I went searching for an answer up the stairs and down the hall, and not to find an answer, just to hear the call of a night bird singing, come away, come away, come away. So we've already talked about rhyme and the kind of syllable structure. But rhyme is another sort of poetic language. It's very similar to figurative language, and it actually makes lines a lot more memorable. So when I see, or it's really you hear a rhyme when you read it aloud. You don't really see it as much. So like when I read this, if I just read it silently, it doesn't do a whole lot. But if you speak it aloud, you can find it. So that's why when I read, especially poems, I like to speak them aloud, and I like to think about like how they sound, how you can also see the syllables, how they sound. So then comes back to the chorus, and then the bridge. I'll just go ahead and skip this last part because these are just the same figurative language types that we've talked about before. And I don't want to go too long with this video because I don't want to piss my classmates off. So I'm going to end it here, but I hope that was somewhat helpful in showing you how I might demonstrate my thinking in front of a class. You definitely, like I said, you can get much more into the cognitive aspects. You can say, I know this word from here, this is what I think of. Um, but it really depends on what you want to focus on. So I'm going to stop screen sharing, and then I'm going to stop recording. But thank you for watching.